Happiness through curiosity on the Ranveer Show.
So in Africa, there is this place called the coup belt of Africa. A coup is it's a regime change operation in which you typically a textbook way of planning and executing a coup in which you take control of certain key strategic locations in a country. It's typically the communication center. Old days it used to be the TV channels and all that, the TV station. Then you do a decapitation strike on a government, which doesn't necessarily mean killing people, but cutting off the head and replacing it with another head so that everything else remains the same, that sort of thing. So this entire region, the Sahara region of Africa, from east to west Africa, is called the coup belt of Africa. And there have been so many coups out there. And this place is dominated by France. It comes in the Francophone region of Africa. And we call this because the French had big colonies, huge colonies out there in the past during the colonial era. Today, France controls these regions through remote control. How? One of the means of doing that is by using the CFA franc. The CFA franc, it comes in two varieties, two flavors, but it's issued by the French government and the bank, the national bank, whichever, I don't remember which one. Look it up, my friends. The one in France. Okay, they issue the currency, they decide the exchange rates, and these nations use that currency, and they pay a certain amount of money to the French for issuing the currency and so on. So essentially, France controls the entire economies of these nations. Okay, and there is a group called ECOWAS, grouping of it's an economic grouping of Western African nations. Nigeria is one of the major nations in this. So it's a coalition which, again, one could say is controlled by France. So this region was historically, under French domination, even after the colonial era ended. And France obviously is part of NATO, and the dominant force in NATO is the US. So France, you could say, is controlled by the US to some extent, and France controls this region. So you can see where the chain of control comes in. So this region has had lots of coups. Every year, typically, you'd see a coup or two. Okay, it's like a supernova explosion happening here and there if you look at a certain region of space, that sort of thing. So recently, there was a coup in a place called Niger. Now, Niger is a country nobody has heard of. It's called, the spelling is Niger. It's called Niger. That's a French pronunciation. That's how I use it. So there was a coup there. And this nation, probably nobody has heard of it, at least in India, because we don't teach about the geography of Africa. But it's a nation that's rich in uranium. Uranium is a fissile element which is used in nuclear reactors to produce power. 70% of France's electricity comes from nuclear power, roughly 70%, give or take a little bit. And a significant portion of the uranium that France consumes to generate electricity comes from Niger. And the government that was in power in Niger was friendly to the French. And now there's been a coup last year, 23. And a different kind of government came to power, and they ejected the French ambassador, and they are pro-Russia and so on. And there's another thing called the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline that is supposed to start in Nigeria, go through Niger, go into North Africa, and through there to Europe. So we've had the Nord Stream bombings, which destroyed the Nord Stream, one of the Nord Stream pipelines, because of which that abundant cheap gas that was flowing into Europe and powering the economy suddenly dried out. And now Europe has to import LNG, liquefied natural gas, from the US at 3 times the price.
So just this one coup actually caused this big economic change?
So I'll tell you what the coup can do. So first of all, the French were buying uranium from Niger at, I don't remember what the rate was. It was like $1 a pound. That sort of thing. And the market value is about 500 times more than that. So they were getting essentially free uranium from Niger. Now that's ended. And now it's at the market price. Whether it's 500x or 200x, I don't remember exactly. Or interested viewers can look it up. Homework. So that's the kind of thing it is. So that cheap, almost free uranium that was flowing into France has ended. Secondly, that pipeline, that gas pipeline that was supposed to be built through Niger may not be built now, because Niger is not friendly to the European powers. They are more pro-Russia. Okay, and Russia has a significant, presence. Let's say presence in the Sahel region, in the Saharan region of Africa. It was the Wagner Group, led by the late Mr. Prigozhin, that used to take care of all of this. Various operations and all that. Now it could be other elements of the Russian army, or maybe a rebranded version of the Wagner Group that may be in all these activities, part of these activities. But the new government in Niger is pro-Russia and anti-West. So the uranium, the cheap uranium, almost free uranium, stopped flowing. That gas pipeline may not happen. And so what we are witnessing in Africa, in all these nations, okay, is a proxy war between the East and the West. The East, I mean Russia, Mr. Putin's, you could say agents, elements, all that, and France and the US. And France typically, when something like this happens, they intervene militarily. They cross the Mediterranean Sea with warplanes. They send troops, and they typically involve ECOWAS, that coalition, and their soldiers as well, which last happened in Mali, I believe, in Timbuktu and all that, just about a decade ago. But this time, France has not intervened. Somehow they have not been able to intervene. They can, but somehow they have not been able to. Maybe somebody more powerful than France instructed them, told them that this time you shall not intervene. And that is bad for the French economy. I'm not saying that colonialism is good. What France has been doing is neo-colonialism. But yeah, this time they have not been able to enforce what they have been enforcing for so long. So you can see France slipping away from power in Western Africa, in Central Africa, maybe mainly Western Africa. You can see Russia advancing its interests in this region. This region is rich in resources, tremendously rich in all kinds of resources. Okay, mineral resources, natural resources, so on and so forth. And wherever you have Russia, you're going to have China. The Chinese have been in Africa for at least 15 years. Okay, they are good at, see, the Chinese are very pragmatic. They will not talk about democracy, human rights, freedom, all that. They will work with whoever is in power. The more autocratic the government, the better it is for them, just like the US. The US also prefers dictatorships as opposed to democracies. So the Chinese, they have been building all this infrastructure in Africa, railways and whatnot, ports and all that, and they use that to extract resources out of Africa. Obviously, they pay for that. Okay, they don't do it the way the East India Company used to do, just steal stuff. They pay for it, but they put autocratic governments in place, dictators in place. They nurture those dictatorships, those relationships, and the Russians are the muscle and the guns, and the Chinese are the brains behind this, and they also have their workers and all that. So the Chinese and the Russians seem to be kind of in a better or more advantageous position in Africa, and the West seems to be kind of losing a little bit of ground in Africa. That's what we are seeing.
Hey, if you enjoyed this clip from the Ranveer Show, we've uploaded a ton of other clips related to a ton of other topics. So explore the channel because there's something for everyone.